Hello, this is Tony Clarkson from the Joseph Communications at the Sanctuary of Healing. I'm here today with my good friend Michael, yet again, as this is number 9 of the Soul Group Messages. And again, as I've said before, I just have no idea what's going to happen. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Michael, and let's see what happens.
It will be terrible to say, well, I've no idea what's going to happen either. I've only got a vague idea of what's going to happen. I know who the communicator is. And over the past few days, there have been at least 3 communicators wanting to get through. We can't go through 3 today. But it's apparent that members of the Soul Group who have something to say, who couldn't say something because we had to get through the Joseph Communications series of books, the philosophy, now wish to fill in some gaps and give advanced perspectives on certain areas that we haven't covered before. The first speaker today, I'm assuming there will be 2 out of the 3, is the Persian Gentleman, PG. And the Persian Gentleman wants to talk about guides, spirit guides. And if I can allow him to come a little closer, he says that there's a lot said about spirit guides on Earth. There is this mythos that is built up around the concept of a guide, as though each of you has someone peering over their shoulder at any time saying, don't go into that shop, that's a bad idea, or park the car 3rd from the left, or are you sure you want to consider doing this? And that's a rather cozy idea of guidance, but it's not what actually happens. First of all, why should you need a guide? You need a guide because it is so difficult for each of you to connect with your true, full consciousness. Because of the fall, the situation, the happening that we've talked about in great detail in Joseph's book, The Fall, a separation occurred between greater consciousness, the greater consciousness of the individual, and the earthly consciousness of the individual. And many souls on earth never even consider that they have a greater consciousness, let alone seek to consult it. And should they seek to consult it, the path to spiritual enlightenment is a difficult one. It takes time, it takes discipline, it takes practice to be able to make that connection with the greater consciousness, with the consciousness that can guide the earthly consciousness. And so, since the time of the fall, spirits who have advanced to a certain extent by traveling through the cleansing spheres that exist beyond the earthly sphere have elected to act as a vibrational bridge between the earthly consciousness of an individual and the greater consciousness of an individual, so that they can, at certain points in an individual's life, put that individual in touch, should they wish to be in touch, with their greater consciousness. The guide, the individual from one of the higher spheres of consciousness, beyond this one of the spirit realms, extends part of their consciousness towards the individual on earth that they have chosen to help. They then seek to filter the consciousness of the individual's higher self down through themselves and into the individual. I hope this is making sense. What I am saying is that there is a gap in the normal flow of information between an individual on Earth and their greater consciousness, whereas on other planets, in other existences, that gap wouldn't exist. In another sphere, on another world, an individual would have access to greater consciousness, to a wider perspective whenever they needed that wider perspective in order to make decisions when traveling through a particular physical sphere. That can't happen on Earth. And so each of you does, in a way, have someone looking over your shoulder, but only when needed. The guide does not walk 2 steps ahead of you and advise you not to do this or to do that in order to have a happy life. The guide is not there to advise you as to which boyfriend or girlfriend you should be connected with. As to which business decision you should make, as to how you should behave. The guide is there to make available that greater perspective that is part of you at times when that greater perspective is needed. For example, if you need to make a spiritually moral decision, if you need to make a decision that will connect you to the points ahead of you that you would otherwise not connect with should you not make the right decision. What I'm trying to say is that there are signposts, there are milestones in everyone's life which, if reached, and it's not always certain that the individual will reach them, if you reach those milestones, then your appreciation of creation and your ability to create and your spiritual consciousness will expand and raise your individual vibration. And so there are crucial moments in each life where a milestone can be reached or bypassed. And at such crucial moments, the guide comes into sharp focus in connection with their ward and makes available intuition from that individual's higher self, makes available the greater perspective that will allow that individual, if that perspective is observed and appreciated, will allow that individual to reach a certain milestone and to, as a result of reaching that certain milestone, which might be a challenge, it may not be something that is a wonderful event in a physical life. It may be a physical challenge or a mental challenge or a spiritual challenge. But as a result of that challenge, if that challenge is tackled correctly, that individual's vibration will increase. The frequency will increase so that they will be able to, once they've left the earth behind, access greater levels of consciousness and creation. It will open doors for them. And so these are the times when the guide is there. Also, the guide is there at times when life becomes extremely difficult, at times when people feel they have had enough, when they feel that they can't go on, when they are in danger of, through temper, for example, becoming violent, when they are in danger through depression of considering that life is not worth continuing with. At such times, the guide is very, very close to the individual and in spiritual terms, puts their arms around them to make that holistic connection for the individual with their higher self. The true guide is the higher self. The true guide is the greater consciousness of the individual, because the greater consciousness of the individual has lived many lives, has gone through many challenges, has resolved many problems, and knows what to do. But because of the fall, because of the change of vibration here that has separated individuals from their true persona, from their complete way of thinking, their spiritual way of thinking, it is necessary for the connection to be made for them. Now, how does a guide choose an individual? Well, the guide who has elected, this is one of the roles of spirits traveling through the cleansing spheres, has elected to act at certain times in an individual's life as a guide. The guide may choose, having said, I will do this job. This is something I want to do, to help someone, to elevate someone during their earthly life. Always has a choice as to whether the individual that is presented to them as a possible connection to them, with them acting as a guide, always has a choice to say no. I don't feel that my vibration links sufficiently with this person. Or, and this will sound a terrible thing to say spiritually, I don't particularly like that person. And can I see the next person, please, that I can consider connecting with as a guide? And that is not meant as a condemnation, a criticism of the person. What they are simply saying is that at this time, the individual that you have presented with to me as a potential someone that I can potentially connect to as a guide, our vibrations, our courses are too disparate at the moment. They do not harmonize well enough for me to consider this individual to be the person that I wish to connect with. And then with the next candidate, as it were, they might say, yes, fine, I will take this person on. The guide also has to consider the challenges that the individual that they connect to will come up against during their earthly life. And they are shown those challenges. They are shown those milestones before making the absolute decision to connect to that person. Because as a guide, at the times when a guide connects strongly with the person on earth, the individual on earth that they are guiding, inevitably there is a leaching of that individual's vibrations into the guide's aura, into their perception of life. And so you can see what a noble endeavor this is, because at times when the person on earth is depressed or in pain or feels hopeless or feels overwhelmed by anger and violence, in order to maintain that connection with the higher self that the individual may or may not choose to make, the guide has to be close enough to the individual, vibrationally speaking, to take on some of their problems, to take on some of their emotional discharge, as it were. And so the connection is made once a guide is satisfied that they can take on, that they are prepared to go through often again, because they have, remember, moved on into the cleansing spheres, to take on again some of the negative experiences, or seemingly negative experiences, that they have already gone through and left behind. They can then connect to an individual for the times during their life on earth when that individual needs help and needs connection to the higher self. Do guides guide all the time? Is a guide with you for your entire life? Well, not really. They are connected to you for your entire life, but they only tune in, as it were, at those times, speaking in earthly terms, when you need guidance the most. And so they will get on with their spiritual business, their spiritual life beyond this one, will engage in the creative activities individually and as part of a soul group that they wish to engage in, having left the earth behind, but will be on call, or part of their consciousness will be on call whenever they are needed at crucial times during the lives of the individuals that they have chosen to guide on earth. And there is, if you would like, a spiritual alarm clock that accompanies the guide, in that they know, because of the vibrational changes in the individual that they are guiding, when that individual is coming up to the times where guidance will be needed. So I've spoken a little bit about guides, but what about guidance? How do you access guidance? Well, one of the things that the guide tries to impress you with in times of trouble, in times of challenge, is that you need to become still, times of trouble, or the lead up to times of trouble and challenge, are not times for action. They are times for stillness. And that is contrary to what most people on earth do when faced with a worrying situation. But the strongest thing that you can do in a challenging time is to step back from that challenging time, is to become still, and is to listen with the heart. What I mean by listen with the heart is to sense with the heart what the truth of the situation you are facing is, and sense with the heart what action should be taken or inaction should be observed during this time of challenge. In other words, you should allow the guide who is with you to do their job, to strengthen your connection between your earthly consciousness and your higher consciousness, your greater self-consciousness. Allow them to do that for you so that you can receive guidance. And the trivial things that are attributed to guides are not, as I've said, what guidance is about at all. It is the important things in life where you need guidance, and it's the important things in life where you should tune in from the heart, from here. Try and move your consciousness down from your head into your heart. You can do this with practice. You can do this again in stillness, and the heart will connect you via your guide with your higher self so that you can make the correct decisions in all areas of your life. And true guidance bypasses the mind, bypasses the head. And true guidance, when it is received, will sometimes seem contrary to what the head is telling you. In fact, will often seem contrary to what the head is telling you. But with practice and with connection to the stillness and connection to your guiding influence, you will gain confidence that what you receive as the means of tackling your future path is correct information, no matter what your head says. And it is the head, of course, that is one of the supporters, one of the staunch supporters of the state of chaos that is as a result of the fall. It is the head that maintains the chaos. The heart sees past and through the chaos to true peace and harmony. I, as you will know from our past connections, am a guiding influence in Michael's life. But my role in Michael's life is somewhat different than the role of many guides with the individuals that they connect to. In that, my role is to once again set up vibrations that allow Michael's heart and spiritual mind to connect with greater consciousness. But in my case, I work to set up vibrations that allow communication to take place. I'm not concerned with Michael's challenges in life. I'm concerned with your challenge that can be answered or partially answered through Michael if we present the correct information to you. So you could call me a universal guide speaking through one point. And there are other guides who choose to do this too. And there are other spirits who work together as a single guide to attempt to steer, through connection with higher vibrations, the course of nations, the course of groups of people, if those groups of people will listen. And now I think if you have read the Joseph books, you will begin to understand the reason why Joseph at one point says that he looks forward to a time where people will sit on behalf of nations, not as governments, but as connections that allow higher vibrations to flow through to those nations, to guide them so that they make the correct, harmonious, loving, spiritual choices on behalf of everyone who lives in those nations. So guidance is going on all the time. But guidance has to be acknowledged, and acknowledged in the right way. One of the things that amuses us is the fact that where guides are thought of by individuals mistakenly, individuals with great curiosity say, I wonder who my guide is. Is my guide a Native American? Is my guide a Chinese Mandarin? Who is my guide? Who was my guide? They must be very important. Your guide cares not for who they were. Your guide cares for who you are and who you are becoming. And they, and I speak on behalf of all guides, would say it's not important who we are. It's not important how we appear to be. It is enough for you to know that we are there. And yes, through spiritual means, through mediums, you can gain some insight as to how your guide may look. But consider Silver Star, who is part of our soul group. He comes through in the guise of a Native American. But he has never been a Native American. But he prefers that suit of clothes to appear to those who can see him in that way. But that's not who he is. It is a suit of clothes. It's not important. When thinking of guidance, when thinking of your guide, just make the connection to a sweet soul who loves you enough to care about your progress through the earthly life and beyond. Don't become bogged down with the trivia of who they are, what they look like. When you can see them, are they around? Not important. That connection is there throughout your life. Take advantage of that connection. It has been hard earned for you by your guide, by someone who cares enough and could go on into increasing bliss, cares enough to fall back, as it were, and to connect with you during your earthly life and to take on some of the harsher aspects of the earthly life in order to help you progress. What love that is. Honor that love, not by seeking out who they are, by wondering what their life was like, but wonder if your life is on the right track and allow that go-between to connect you with your higher consciousness, with the greater part of yourself that it is difficult to connect with in the early stages if you are surrounded by materialism, if you have not considered anything higher in terms of vibration and creation than what is in front of your five senses. Yes. I also have to touch on, is a guide with you for life? Not always. Because if you connect with your higher self to the degree that your vibration and the vibration of your higher self are totally compatible, then you have no need of a guide. You are your own guide. Ultimately, you are your own guide. And at the point that you are sufficiently awakened spiritually, then your guide, with love and still observing your life whenever they wish to, steps aside and says, the modern equivalent of my work here is done, because their work is done. You know how to connect with your higher self. There is no need for a go-between, and any go-between is a filter, and therefore is even if it's only to the nth degree, is a screen between your state of being and the state of being of your higher self. So we remove the filter completely, and you have a pure connection with your higher self, and you guide yourself, and you've got it, and you've won. And when you get back to the spirit world, we will say, well done. You can now move onwards, and you don't have to go back to the earth, which would be your choice, of course, had you not discovered this connection with the greater world that you have already earned through past experience and past lives.